So you guys have done something a little bit unique and outside of the box when it comes to evaluating passing. You're still statting it on the 3 or 4 point scale. That hasn't changed, but you're doing it slightly differently in how you evaluate that information. Can you explain to us how that works?
Yeah, I think the measurement is the same, and just the way that we're analyzing it is a little bit different. I think a lot of coaches are probably familiar with a 3-point passing scale, or some are using a 4-point passing scale. A 0 for a reception error, 1 for a bad pass, 2 for a medium pass, a decent pass but not perfect, and then 3 for a perfect pass. And then some coaches and teams use a 4-point scale where they add this sort of perfect ball that the setter doesn't have to move at all, essentially. So I think a lot of coaches are familiar with that. So we're using the similar sort of grades for that, but just instead of saying that's a 3-point pass, we would actually look and say, okay, based on that quality of pass, here's how often teams side out, first ball side out at our level on that. So international, women's international volleyball, perfect pass, 53% first ball kill. So instead of saying, oh, that's a 4, that's like a 53. So you kind of you just look at your level and how teams first ball side out, and then you have some different multipliers, different coefficients for doing your passer rating. And then, so what we like about that is then after each match or as the season goes on, we can look at it and say, okay, our passing is like a 38. So it's like, based on all these passes that we've done, we would expect to first ball side out at about 38%. And then we look and say, okay, well, our offense is siding out, actually first ball siding out at a 41. So our passers are creating the opportunities for 38, and our hitters and our setters are actually converting at 41. And then we would look at that and say, okay, our setters and hitters are doing about as good of a job as they could be doing based off that quality of pass. So if we want to improve our offense, it's really not about our offense, it's about our passing. Or you could easily have the other solution, the other situation. Our passers are creating enough opportunities for us to be first ball siding out at 42%, but we're down here at 38 to 39. And then we would look at that and say, well, it's not the passing equation. The passers are doing what they need to be doing. And then we're looking at say, okay, well, what is our setters are doing? What is our hitters doing? And then we're focusing our training there. We're reviewing, when we go back and review the video, that's what we're watching more closely. Or if it's during a match, then we're saying, okay, is this the change that we need to make? If we're going into a game 4, game 5, hey, do we need to tweak this or tweak that? So it's the same measurement that people are doing. It's really the same judgment for passing, but it's just using it and looking at it in a little bit of a different way. And we really like this comparison to first ball side out, because then it lets us know where we need to focus our coaching attention and our coaching eye, more on the offensive end or more on the passing end.
You're also using a slightly different approach in how you measure blocking, in that rather than just statting a solo block or an assist block, and you guys are actually taking it a step further in that you're measuring the effectiveness of the attacker against specific blockers. Can you explain to us exactly how that works?
Yeah, actually I started doing this when I was still coaching in college. And the question we were trying to answer was, we had 2 middle blockers and we wanted to figure out which was the better blocker. And it's kind of this age-old problem. We had one that was more the veteran player, maybe a smarter player, more experienced, not quite as athletic or physical. And then we had the freshman who was bigger, more athletic, a little less polished. And that player was blocking more balls, but we wanted to say, well, was she actually a better blocker? Because even the best blockers out there, maybe they're going to stuff 10% of the balls that they actually really go to block, and a hitter hits it against them. So there's 90% of the balls that hitters are hitting that aren't being measured, and we wanted to try to figure out the values of those measures. I mean, we all have all seen blockers that reach outside their body or do these other moves, and they're getting tooled more, and maybe they get that stuff 1 out of every 5 times, but the other 4 times they're getting tooled. And we're just, okay, like, we need to piece together what that means. And what's the difference between like 1.1 blocks per game and 1.05, or 1.2 blocks per game or 1.1. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, that doesn't seem like it means anything. It's just hard to really quantify that. So basically what we did was we just took all these different types of contacts we have, and I just made up some rules basically. Okay, hey, the ball gets deflected in this way or it gets deflected in that way. I mean, obviously a stuff block or a direct tool is pretty easy to measure. And then even looking at how many times the blocker jumped to block and the hitter hit it hard and there was no touch. They got hit by either because they weren't high enough, they weren't up high enough and the hitter just hit over them, or they were in a wrong spot, the hitter hit around them, or there was a seam or whatever. So just kind of looking at all these different things that can happen when the hitter hits the ball and how that affects the hitting efficiency. And the long story short, we actually found that this kind of the veteran middle blocker, who was maybe not as athletic, was actually stuffing less balls per game, but hitters were actually hitting less efficiently against her because the other qualities of her touches were better. She wasn't getting tooled as much, and she was having more positive touches. So that was something where we kind of dug a little deeper to try to see these little nuances. And the kind of the core concept is, ultimately my job as a blocker is to prevent the hitter from scoring. So it just kind of cut out all the other stuff and say, well, how well are hitters hitting when this person's blocking? And there's probably a few different ways to do it. We do it through data volley, but that's something that you could do that on pencil and paper. Just if you just either live or you're just watching it afterwards on video and just marking, okay, here's all these hitters' swings against this blocker. Okay, get 50, 100 swings against this blocker, 50, 100 swings against that blocker, and see.
Okay, so you'd mentioned you can do this on pencil and paper. For a high school coach or a club coach, can you give us a little more guidance on how we could get that started in our gyms?
Yeah, what you could just do is just look at when this blocker is blocking. So you would chart it just like you were charting a hitter, but you just flip it around so you're looking at when the blocker is blocking against all hitters. So if you're trying to find out a hitter's hitting efficiency, you would just look at every time they get a kill, give a little tally, have a little column that has kills, give a little tally every time they get a kill, and then you have a little column every time that there's an error or they get blocked, and you mark it in there. And then you have this other column when there's just a continue, they hit it in and it gets dug and there's no kill and no error, either one. So you just got those three columns. So you would do the same thing for blockers. You would just say, okay, every time this blocker is blocking, no matter what hitter is against them, every time the hitter gets a kill, you mark the kill, and every time that this blocker gets a block or the hitter hits out, mark that, and then every time the hitter hits the ball in, whether it gets dug or whether it's a controlled touch, you just put it in there, so that you would be able to get a hitting efficiency against that blocker. That's kind of the simplest way to do it, and I think a lot of coaches could probably be able to do that, and just even with limited resources, probably do that.